Welcome to the Tearing It Up podcast. I'm your host, Taryn. We'll be tearing it up, tearing it down, and tearing it apart, dissecting all things related to those who deviate from the standard. From leaders of their industry to leaders of mediocrity, and maybe a gear review or two thrown in. We shoot the shit and let the conversations flow, so if that's not your style, this may not be for you. Otherwise, listen in. Hope to light a fire in you somehow. We're back! We're here! I always feel so weird with the countdown of everyone's like so quiet, and then all of a sudden we're like, recording, here we are. Some podcasts, you just hear the recording start and they're like mid-conversation. I'm like, we should start doing that somehow so it doesn't feel so like, I don't know. Hey guys, but that's where we are. Hey guys. We are here today. We've got Amber back with us and our new pal Sam, who we met at the Sturdy Dirty this year. Met her camping Friday night, and she had her daughter with her, and we just vibed with this gal instantly. And I'm so stoked to have her on and talk about Rome Fest, because Sam is a big part of This Is Rome. We'll dive in more into that and find out exactly, because I don't even know really, like, if you were the gal, one of the original gals. I can't wait to hear how like Rome Fest came about and all that. But also I just want to share your story too, personally, because I know that you've gone through a lot of changes in life lately, and I don't know, I think it would just be something great for everyone out there to hear if they're in a similar situation, and just kind of dispelling fear of change at the age that we're at, especially like major change and whatnot. So Sam, with that, I'm going to turn it to you, and I would love you to tell the people where you are at physically in the world right now as we talk today.
Great place to start. Let's orient and ground. I am in Sandpoint, Idaho, and that is, if you don't know, it is like an hour south of like Creston, BC. So right below the Canadian border. So we're sandwiched between Spokane and Montana, like way up in the top of the Panhandle, 8 hours north of Boise. For people that are like, oh, I know Idaho. I've been to Boise. I've never been to Boise, but apparently it's really cool. It's slightly a little bit more progressive than Sandpoint. But yeah, I'm way up here on a bunch of water, which is one of the reasons, actually, speaking of fires, this morning we were talking about fires. We are surrounded by so much water. And I moved up about 7 years ago after the 2017 fires that went through Santa Rosa, pretty frightening. And we moved up here and tried to reset our nervous systems, and have stayed ever since.
Wow. I didn't realize that was my next question. Yeah. Where are you from? The Santa Rosa area originally?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up there. I mean, we could dive deep into childhood, but yeah, grew up there, lived there, went to school like near San Francisco. A dance and psychology major, crazily enough, but only about an hour and a half from home, which was great. And then, did dance, and then found cycling in my like mid-20s, when dance was kind of, you either went professional or you were a starving artist. And started picking up mountain biking in my mid-20s, and then that's kind of led me towards, up in Sandpoint we have massive mountains and a ton of mountain biking and a lot of outdoor recreation, really good snowboarding and skiing and such. So that's probably always where I will find myself, near mountains.
Yeah. Good place to be.
Which isn't that far. I mean, growing up near Tahoe, right? It was like 4 hours from Tahoe. That was where we recreated. But it was a haul, and it got to be so crowded trying to get to from Tahoe on the weekends. And
it's it is crazy. It's so hard to not get frustrated just trying to drive around on a daily basis in the winter and in the summer, because there's so many people during the height of both those seasons, and you're like, I'm just trying to go to fucking work. I just need eggs, I'm just trying to go to the store.
I'm just trying to get to therapy and get home, and there's so many tourists everywhere.
It's so hard, but I'm like, there's just really nowhere else to go. There's just so many people in the world at all. It's mind blowing. I'm like, you really just can't go anywhere. But we kind of touched a little bit on fires, and there's a couple like on either side of me yesterday that started, and just driving up our road, I was having these thoughts that I was trying not to get too deep in, but I'm like, man, this is what happened like in Paradise, California a couple years ago, and just all these big fires that people literally get stuck. Like there's no way out. I was like, we need a four-wheeler so we can just bust through some of these woods if we need to. It's like we need to figure out, there's a gate on one of these Forest Service roads. I was like, someone needs to have the code for that in our area so we can bust that open and go that back way if we need to. Because like these fires right now are like, yeah, one was right in the heart of Truckee, literally behind the store that I worked at. But they got on it super quick. And then this one's down the road just a little bit, like it's Nevada, but still where it's at can just come right up the side of 80. But it's just such a crazy world we live in right now. And so when I'm in town thinking about, oh, I'm just annoyed by the traffic, then it hits harder with these actual like natural disaster problems that could happen. And like, okay, I don't need to be mad that I can't get to the store in 5 minutes when the real problem is like escaping.
Yeah, evacuation routes.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, but not to bring it down. You talked about
it's a reality.
It is. It is, and it's happening right now. And a lot of our listeners are located in the West. So, and I mean, even this is happening on the East and everywhere. Fires are running rampant, but especially in the last 10 years on the West, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, California, Colorado, everywhere have been dealing with so many more fires. So I think a lot of our listeners, even Alaska and Canada, like they can relate to this very real thing that hits us in the summer. So
I have to say, there is something so fundamentally healing about water. Like there is a weird, so I'm in a very conservative area, right? North Idaho, known for like the white supremacy church that was really only disbanded not long ago. And it's definitely like, it's still incredibly white up here. It's very, very, very straight. Like there is definitely a lot of mega churches. And yet at the same time, there is like this, one of the first things I noticed here was there was more yoga studios per person. Like there was just such a high density of yoga studios. And I was like, that's really interesting. And then I started to notice that there were more artists and so many musicians. And then I went through an art fair yesterday that last year was like 1 block or maybe 2. And this year was 4 blocks. Like there is this hub of folks with increasing or greater consciousness that are gravitating towards Sandpoint. I'm part of the Pride organizing committee here, and this was our 4th year. I think we had 1,500 people come through last year. I think we had like over 2,000 this year come through. Like there's definitely something really remarkable here. And I just feel like part of it I feel like it's quite related to having water, and that it does bring people that are seeking healing, I guess, in some regards here, not to make it like super woo woo, but I had a friend come visit me from Salt Lake City, and she's an indigenous woman out of Mexico. And she came to Sandpoint as like a woman of color, a queer woman of color. And she was like, I should be scared here. Like all my family told me to be really scared to come here. And she's like, and yet I don't feel scared. Like she came and helped me organize with Pride. And she was just like, it feels like there's a lot of healers here and people healing. And I was like, yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Real. So I'm raising a 4-year-old daughter here, and I have to believe, and I have to put all of my energy towards that, because otherwise I get overwhelmed.
It's amazing. Well, it's true. There is a lot of science behind it. So there's this book called Blue Mind that I got, years ago, and I still haven't like dove all the way in it, but it talks about just that. Like even on the cover of the book, it's like Blue Mind, the surprising science that shows how being near, in, on, or underwater can make you happier, healthier, more connected, and better at what you do. And
I'm writing this down. Blue Mind.
Yeah, it's by Wallace J. Nichols. But yeah, it's all about that connection we have. And I think it talks even, just about from the fact of when we're in the womb, we're surrounded by water. So there is this actual deep interpersonal connection that we have with water and the comfort of it. And it is. And you hear a lot of people say that. I mean, it's always been a healing space for me. And I chalked that up to being from the Northwest, being on the Puget Sound, growing up fishing, like always being in and around water, that it was just like my family had a connection with it and thus I did and whatnot. But it goes deeper than that. And people who like move to areas where they're surrounded by it feel this and don't want to leave it. And I mean, in Santa Rosa, you're right there. It's not like you were ever far from it either. But it's a real thing. So when you can actually feel that and make that connection, I think it's just important. And it's insane that there's people who parts of the world that are so landlocked and you don't have that at all. I'm just like, oh my God, but you don't know what you don't know either. So if you have never experienced it, you don't know what you're missing out, which is also kind of good. That you don't know what you're missing is kind of a nice place to be in sometimes. But it's amazing that you get to raise your daughter in that place and just teach these connections to her as well. And it sounds like Sandpoint is becoming a place where by the time she's a little bit older, will be not have those kind of stereotypes that it maybe has now and can grow in its own right.
That's my hope. That is definitely my hope. It's interesting you brought in the science of the water, because that instantly made my brain go to like I gave birth in a tub here, which I'm going to tie in. I promise it's not unrelated, even though I do like to tell more people about births, because I don't think I heard nearly enough about giving birth before doing it. But she was born in water, and at like a midwife, a birth center in town that actually no longer exists because we lost our labor and delivery unit at the hospital, because we can't have we have the strictest abortion laws in the country. Therefore, we have it transcends to just like women's healthcare, because OBGYNs can't really treat pregnant women for fear that if there is any kind of complications for the mother or fetus, it can put the doctors at really high legal risk of being like put in prison, essentially. And so we've lost all of our OBGYNs, so they had to close the labor and delivery unit. So all the midwives don't really, most of the people here that wanted to give birth naturally had the backup of the hospital, but now our closest hospital is an hour away. So it's really interesting living like in this hub of like progressive humans and like more female business owners in this town than I've ever seen in other towns, or maybe I just know them all. And yet like the legislation around us is really counter to our humanity, I would say. But yeah, raising Ani, and I actually feel like she really raises me. That's my daughter. And she already has like all the wisdom, like she knows what water does in her body, and she knows like all the things that I'm trying to unlearn about taking care of others before myself. And she was born innately with this wisdom. So I'm just like trying to be raised by her as much as possible, and trust that like if we get to high school time and it's not a place where they teach consent and respect in relationships, let alone sex ed, that like we will find our place to be, and she will get that understanding, and she will orbit around peers that have also been taught about respect and consent and healthy relationships and all that stuff. But yeah, Amber, you're a parent. You're trying to do the damn thing amidst a world that is burning. Yeah.
Yeah. And amidst separation and all sorts of other things. Yeah. You're touching on a lot of good hot topics. And I mean, water is the source of all life, right? Like we all wouldn't be here if it wasn't here. So there is obviously an innate attraction to it. And so we must protect it at all costs. Yeah. It's very important.
Yeah. Amber, I'm
important.
Curious, being a parent and what Sam just said about moving, if you need to in high school, if the area you're in now isn't giving your child what they need, have you thought much about that? Because I haven't it's interesting. I just feel like we didn't grow up like that, right? You live where you are because your parents want to be there and it's their jobs and whatever. And I just think, Sam, that outlook you have is in itself just more progressive and amazing, and of like, wow, yeah, look at, like, you don't think about moving, or, well, I don't have a kid, so like it wouldn't cross my mind of like, oh yeah, moving for your kid's education. Usually you're moving for something else, and you are looking at schools like, oh, there's great schools around here, this works out, hooray, but not necessarily because of those reasons first and foremost. And I know, I'm sure it's a little bit different in the things that we talked about just with boys and girls, but it's also not, because boys also need to learn about, consent and like sexual education in this, but we put a lot of that onus on our girls. And that feels like a little fucked up in itself, of like, it's the girl's responsibility to learn sex education and know this and that. But here we are again, still like, oh, but not the teenage boys. Like, they don't need to know. The girl has to be able to say no. And it's like, no, the boys need to know, like, that if no is said, it's a no. Boys need to know that they can say no. And just sexual education. And have you, Amber, like, what are your thoughts on just the way education's going around you right now? Is it a concern for you, or are you guys doing okay?
Well, we're doing okay, and we live in a very urban city, and my kid goes to a school in a district that's outside of the city that we live in. And I think the education he gets there is good. If I were to consider moving, I think it would be more so for like the population. Like Tacoma, I've lived here my whole life, and it is getting packed and crowded and scary and so many homeless people. And it's like, luckily we don't have to deal with the stuff that you're dealing with, Sam, with like reproductive rights. And like, we're still very much so protected in this little bubble that we're in the West Coast. And it's wild to hear and talk to someone who's as progressive and aware as you are and living amidst that. Like, that's so terrifying. Like, I just, like, my heart goes out to all the women who are living in Sandpoint right now, because that is like one of my biggest fears. And as a woman who's raising a boy, I don't have to worry about that for him, but I definitely have to worry about that for my community of women. And then back to your question, Taryn. I think that if I were to move, it would be to have like a better intimate living situation. It wouldn't be for like school. It would be for like our homestead. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah. And totally. We have property out in like a rural area. I bought it with my ex and a friend of ours. We have like 7.5 acres out in a more rural area. And I like follow the school out there on Facebook, just because like it is a possibility for us to move out there. But yeah, currently Quincy's schooling situation is okay. And I feel like I am an aware enough individual that I'll teach him. He already knows consent. Like, he'll do things to my body, and I'm like, I have to like stop him in our tracks and be like, you do not treat women's bodies like that. And like, he definitely gets like very remorseful and like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm the worst. And I'm like, no, baby, you're fine. Truly you are. But just like, know that there is like this respect around other people's bodies. And he's only 8, we're going to go through like so puberty. Many more learning. There's so many opportunities for learning. And I just hope that I can nurture the good as much as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think both of you have just an amazing wherewithal. And again, it's something that comes with just a generation of changing attitudes around not just parenting, but a lot of ideals, and not just this like my way or the highway kind of thing. And I know there's still plenty of people that parent that way. I know there's plenty of instances to still kind of have that attitude with your child in disciplined ways, and everyone has the right to parent in the way they want to. But I think overall, just our letting go of what the previous generation's ideas are, like we're seeing a lot of that. We're getting a lot more I don't know, just input from children and talking a lot more, having a lot more conversations with our kids than maybe like our parents had with us. And like I said, I think there's plenty of times and places where there's time for a conversation and there's time for I said no, like, and in a straight kind of disciplined manner, especially if it comes to actually getting hurt or hurting someone. But yeah, I just always like to hear your guys' takes on it, because like I said, I'm not a parent. I have nieces and nephews, and like a much, 4, almost 5, 3, 1. So I get to see the way my brother and sister-in-law parent, and I get to see how Amber does it through the school age. And it's just, I don't know, so interesting to me to see how people do things. Because when you're a kid, you're not noticing how necessarily how other parents are parenting. You're just knowing like, oh, well, like so-and-so gets to do this. Like, why can't I stay up until 9, But yeah,
why do they get the good lunches and I have the whole wheat bread?
Yeah, totally. But Sam, you also mentioned, because I'd love to hear about kind of getting into cycling and Rome Fest, because I think this all wraps into one, being that we've talked about a little bit of women's rights, especially where you live and whatnot. And I know Rome Fest is a gathering for women or women identifying folks. And I can't wait to hear about how that all started. And we are curious, though, like of the childhood, how it all really began, your interest in either the outdoors or activity in general. You talked about being a dancer, and I love that you also mentioned you got to that point where I have to make a decision. I'm going to do this professionally or I'm going to be a starving artist, because I think a lot of sports are like that. And coming off the Olympics, I've had a lot of thoughts about a lot of these sports that are seemingly only available to a very small, somewhat elite or privileged group. And to get to the Olympic level athlete in even these sports that are more accessible, like soccer or basketball, well, you still have to, especially soccer, there's the premier club. So it's like, no, to get to this level of athlete in any sport, you really have to put in a lot of work, be starving, or be lucky. Very, very lucky. So, when did you start dancing? Or what did you start with sport-wise?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I had to let the very loud cat in. I couldn't tell if you could hear him through my speakers, but
I think I have to let a dog out. So yeah.
Go for it.
Who let the dogs out?
I know, right? I started with horses. I think that's a pretty, I think that's like a kind of I think if you know how to ride a horse, like the bike body separation thing comes a little bit more naturally. So started with horses. So I guess like really original Sam, like what is my foundation? My sister has really, really intense learning disabilities. And so all through school, she was bullied really, really intensely by peers and also by teachers and adults that were supposed to be, the kind people, because people just didn't really understand my sister. And as the younger sibling, I definitely I saw that from a very early age, and I developed a pretty strong need to protect her. And I couldn't do that because she wasn't in my class. And yes, sometimes we'd have recesses overlap, but for the most part, I would just see it or hear about it. And it devastated me. It would wreck me. And it got so bad at one point, she developed grand mal seizures. And no doctors were saying the reason the seizures came about is because Courtney has so much stress, or Courtney, hates going to school every single day. And but you just know, when your body carries that, that much repeated exposure to trauma, which it definitely was. And we moved schools every single year to try to find a different school setting and different peers. And, so all that to say, I developed a really strong desire to help people from a very early age, and got into, right after college with a psych degree, got into suicide prevention work, crisis counseling. And then I went into direct programming for anti-bullying curriculums in schools, and orbited in the mental health field for a long time. the like physical thread that ran throughout was horses for a while, because Courtney connects with plants and animals, always has, much better with humans. She's a farmer, and she does like horse-based farming now in New York. But we found horses when we were like 7. I was 7, she was 10, and we did horses every single day after school, every single weekend, all summer long for about 10 years, until I sold my horse to go to college when I was 18. And that was something that was fraught with social dynamics and peer bullying a bit, but a little bit less so, because it wasn't as a parent, Courtney can't do math. That's just like not where her strengths lie. She's brilliant in so many areas, but math and I think it was primarily math was like the biggest area of like absolutely could not keep up with grade level, and was treated pretty poorly. But with the horses, it was amazing. She was amazing. She has always had a gift with animals. And then in high school, so we did like Waldorf school in the beginning, and then we switched out of that and we did like a homeschool group, and then we did a magnet school, and then actually started with Spanish immersion anyways, and then ended up at public. And in public high school, my high school had this incredible dance program, and I thrived in that. I had never really danced before, but I found that, and just like took it as far as I could, did as much dancing as I possibly could. Actually got a dance scholarship to go to college for dance. And that was like a place where I could be beautiful at a time when you're just trying to get affirmed, and trying to figure out what, so there was definitely the performance element to it. And then there was these moments where I would just really find myself and my truth. I specifically had like a duet that I just pulled up in therapy recently in my mind of this other gay kid, and him and I did this duet, and I remember just feeling so true, because I had very strange relationships with boys and challenging relationships with girls because I didn't know I was gay, and with Roro, it was just like, it was so easy. He was this amazing gay boy that was just destined for like fucking New York City ballet. Like he just levitated. He was so brilliant, and he was Black and gay, and he lived in an incredibly redneck community of Forestville, California.
Wild.
Yeah, I kind of went down a rabbit hole a bit there, but the thread I think that ran throughout, which pulls in very much so for me with Rome Fest, is the desire to help people like feel loved, right? Feel love for themselves, feel seen for who they are. And I did mental health, and I always describe my trajectory as like, I started at the edge of the waterfall. Like I was 19 and I had an internship on a suicide hotline, which is just insane looking back. Like if Ani came to me and was like, hey, I'm 19 and I'm going to do this intern at a suicide hotline, I'd be like, baby, maybe that's a lot. But I did. And we took like both local calls, and then also we took the VA hotline rollover calls. So I was talking to like 80-year-old Vietnam vets that had been, disabled and alone for like 50 or 60 years. It was so crazy. But I say I like started at the edge of the waterfall and then tried to work my way upstream to like actually be able to intervene or meet people when they were not so close to the edge. So I worked with foster youth, and then I started doing some like wilderness therapy stuff. And then with Rome Fest, it's like, it is mental health without question, because we get so many moms out there and so many women that have yet to really unveil their power. So many non-binary folks, queer people, women of color, folks that kind of have existed in the margins with a lot of different layers of identity that makes it a little bit harder to navigate the world than cisgendered white men that have lived with kind of a little bit more privilege, perhaps. And I think that is why Rome Fest is like, this year we're going to have 800 women and femme out in the desert on bikes, which is like double, like a third more than we've ever had before. And we have like 45 brand partners coming, and it's gotten to this place where it's like, it's more powerful than we can even put our finger on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is because of the power that women and femme are finding in like changing
Yes.
their own tires, in fixing their own derailleurs, in that translating to, oh, I can actually do a lot of things for myself. And it's kind of incredible. I think you have to come. You both have to come.
I know. I've wanted
yes.
to for years. And this year, though, I've one of my best friend's weddings that weekend.
There's so many weddings that weekend.
I know, and I'm so bummed because I know that I was like, this is the year. I say that every year, and I know this year there's only one, right, in Fruta and not Sedona this year. So I was like, I'll do the Sedona one, and because hasn't Sedona typically been like in October?
November,
yeah. So I was like, I can make that one. I'm like, oh shoot. But what number of Rome Fest is this? Like 6, 7?
No, I think we are 10.
10.
I think we are a 10th festival. So Ash and Andy, you kind of asked if I was one of the originators, and Ash and Andy started Rome Fest. Ash and Andy Zoltan, dear friends of mine. In 2017, Ash was working for Live Cycling and was doing demos, and was just seeing that demos, just kind of posting up at a bike shop and having, men and women and all folks jump on the bikes, wasn't really working. And her wheels kind of started of like, there would be a better way to reach women and femme folk in the cycling world, that like most of the bike shops were run by gentlemen. And so Ash started thinking like, is there a way to do this better? So she proposed to Liv, hey, we should do like a women specific demo day. And Liv was like, we're not an event company. She's like, well, what if I was? So that kind of was the origination of Rome. She pulled over on the side of the road and started drafting up like a business plan essentially for Rome. And we've gone, I think when I came in, so I met them through the Sturdy Dirty actually in 2018.
Awesome.
And they were helping with the Sturdy Bitches in Oak Ridge, was the first race I ever did there. Oh my gosh, it was.
I forgot there was 3 spots for a while.
Yeah.
Oak Ridge, Ketchum, and
they did one at they always did Tiger. They did Silver Mountain and Kellogg, and then they did Oak Ridge, and then I think even one year they did like Mammoth, maybe. Yeah, I never did that, but in Oak Ridge I met Ash and Andy, and I didn't know then what I know now, which is like I needed to be around queer people. I needed to know lesbians. Like I just had no experience with lesbians, but I gravitated towards them so strongly, which I understand now. But at the time, it was just like, oh, these people are fucking incredible. Their energy is just outstanding. The way that they rally people and get people to just understand their own worth was remarkable. So I started kind of stalking them, hey, do you need a volunteer at this event? Hey, do you need a volunteer at that event? And they would let me come on and, scramble eggs and lead the very early bike, the very beginner bike riders and things. So I did like one in Bend, Oregon, and then I drove to Montana. I was just like, I will follow you anywhere.
Yes.
And then just became really good friends with them. They helped us, my previous partner and I, get married, which like we'll go down the whole wormhole of being a late in life lesbian probably for another day. But they were at our wedding. Then my daughter was born. They became really connected to my daughter. And then Ash was getting to a place where she couldn't manage the business solo as much as she wanted to. It was just getting way too big. I think she had 28 events the first year I came on, between 25 one-day demo events across the whole entire country and 3 massive festivals. And she was running it with herself and like 4 really part-time friends, a little bit employees, but nobody was contracted. And so I came in and she actually offered me, she was like, I don't know if we can pay you, but if you can help me, help me make this business viable, like, let's make this work. And that was in 22. I think my daughter was 2. Yeah, I was in 22. And I've been director of operations and partnerships ever since. And Ash still holds, the CEO founder. She does all of our, all of our website development. She still holds like the visioning and the big picture, and runs a lot of the day-to-day still. And then yeah, I pick up a lot of the pieces, and then we have 8 people that are year round part-time, and then every festival we ramp up to. This year we'll have 40 full full event staff, and then we'll have about 100 volunteers. Yeah. It's
dang
big.
That
It's
sounds
really big.
awesome. It's still on my list, man. I want to go for sure. I'm so bummed the timing doesn't work out this year. For the people out there who are not avid mountain bikers, can you tell them what they would expect out of Rome Fest and what exactly Rome Fest is?
Yeah. So it's a bike party. It is not a competition. It's not a race. It's not a clinic. So Ash was really adamant that she didn't want it to be anything competitive. She came out of like the rugby world, and she's just has competitive nature. As she always says, she's a total head case at clinics. So she didn't want any kind of element of competition. She just wanted it to be really like a bike party in the desert with a bunch of friends. And that is exactly what it is. It is riding. It is bike demos. You can go out with a guide, or you can just create your own group. There's a ton of bike brands, such as, Wild Rye, Shredly. God, there's so many I could run off the list. REI is always there. We have almost all the bike brands that you can demo. A lot of apparel brands, the newer ones. We definitely get reached out to by a lot of women-owned businesses and femme-owned businesses. So we're always really trying to bring them in. Curious Creatures was a brand that launched last year. Actually, at Rome was their first event.
Oh, cool.
Such an incredible brand. And then Smartwool came in this last year in just a really, really massive way. And just so you can, get your free socks, and then you can buy a jersey, and then you can ride with the jersey. Not that it's not all about how you look, obviously, but that doesn't hurt. When you feel good, you look good, you feel good.
Exactly. Yep. We've talked about that a few times for sure with Taylor Ann of Ride Force and just some other Marley Blonsky. I mean, it is important feeling good in what you're wearing, because it's not always like just how you look, but it's actually like the fit of what you're wearing. Like you feel like you can move and do anything. It's like your fucking cape and superhero outfit. You're like, hell yeah, I'm ready to rock.
100%. And a lot of the work that I do from the brand partnership side is, asking our brands, like, if you don't have inclusive sizing, like, why not? And what's the barrier? And how can we help you? What are the conversations that need to happen? We can help network. Shredly's been doing, huge sides runs with everything that they create for so long. And so it's like connecting Ashley Rankin of Shredly with, Tasha already knows. And this year she's actually going to have Tasha of Curious Creatures. She's going to have like much more expanded sizes. And it matters. And I think for a long time in the cycling industry, because it was so primarily male, it was like, oh, just put on the shorts that get handed down to you that may or may not, fit your body or your curves. And similarly with bikes too, like, I think we don't necessarily need but like femme specific bikes, but I definitely think that getting your suspension set for you and where we hold our weight or how we ride, or, all of those things really do matter. And we have, I think now we're like almost entirely femme mechanics. I think every single brand has a female or femme mechanic that they send, which was not that way in 2017. Like, it was hard to get the brands to even have a single woman in the company to send. Like, Ash would be like, do you have a bookkeeper? Like, do you have an HR? Because it was just dudes working it and women coming. And what we found is, because we do so many workshops, how to fix your flat, how to fix your derailleur, how to poop in the woods, how to start your own business, because all these workshops happen, if they're coming from the men of the companies, it just lands differently. And we do really extensive surveys after every festival. And so the participants really reflect, like, not every gentleman obviously is mansplaining, but there's just a different energy. There's different ways that there's a very different energy. I mean, even when I'm trying to figure out how to put bar tape on my gravel bike and I can find a female mechanic on YouTube, I can hear it differently. And I don't necessarily I don't have anything against men, much to my ex-husband's feelings. I don't hate men at all. I just think that there's a very different energy when we're learning from other women and other empowered women.
125 million %. I know that Amber and I feel that same way. We're obviously always for the ladies, but we are not against our men. I grew up in a very dominated male world as far as sports and athletics. And I mean, we still fight it with biking and snowboarding and the things that we do, but I coach wrestling. I coach primarily males, boys. Like, I don't have a problem being around them, but it is, like you said, I can take advice from a man, and I know, when it's like mansplaining versus no, they're helping me. But like you said, there's still a time that, if a woman's telling me the same exact thing, there's a different energy about receiving it. There's just no question about it. Obviously, again, too, there's always exceptions, but most of the time I know that it's truly coming from a place of like progressing, like them wanting me to progress for my betterment, rather than like we're a part of a team and this guy's telling me this so I can be better because he wants to be better. Like for our co-ed softball team, this guy I fucking love. He's the hype guy. He's great. But he's always given everybody advice. But sometimes I'm like, all right, like this is for fun. Needed. Some of these people have never ever played softball in the first place, so you're definitely giving them advice, but also it's like so the team can win rather than making them feel good. Sometimes they know they don't know what they're doing, so they might actually feel worse because they're cool. Every time you've got a comment to make to me of how I can be better, like I'm not this kind of athlete, like let me just play. And maybe I'm projecting some of my own feelings on it, even though but said if a woman is saying it's just clearly out of their own heart is the feeling I get, rather than, like I said, this is meant to like help them out somehow. So love our men, but any women's event, I'm always like, why is that guy here? Like, can't there be a woman in his place?
Yeah. But I feel like with women, it comes from a more nurturing thing, and being a woman, like it's a scientific thing. When women talk, there's just a different connection. Like we look into each other's eyes, we sit and listen, and like the tone is different. And I feel like for a lot of women, and maybe I'm speaking out of my ass for this, but it's like there's a distrust. And I don't know quite what it is, but there is. I recently found a rental for one of my girlfriends, and she and I both talked to the owner, and she was like, "What's your vibe with this guy? What do you think?" She's like, my internal compass towards men is just so fucked up." And I'm like, yeah, well, it's rightfully so. There's just, like, I'm not a man, so I don't know what it's like to walk through this world as a man, but I have a good idea, and it's not pretty. Like there's a lot of like things to uphold, and like competition, and like a lot of falseness because of this standard that has to be upheld. In my opinion.
I agree with that. And I mean, what's interesting for us, people, women, not even our age, just women overall today who weren't literally born, like yesterday or 2 years ago. We're walking through a weird ass fucking world right now where we had all these rights and now all of a sudden we're getting pulled backwards. So we may not have had this like distrust in men. I have great relationships with the men in my life, so I don't have this distrust from that aspect of things. But in general society, the men who are not close to me, yeah, I do, because of shit that's happening and that has still always been against us in the political side and anything like that, knowing that there's beliefs out there still that men are like, you don't belong here. Except my close men haven't told me that, but it's still outside and it happens around us. So I do think it's a huge distrust that a lot of us have for men that we are not super close with or don't truly know. And that's where we have a wall up instantly of, or you're not going to ask the question. So coming back to Rome Fest and having men like bike mechanics there, especially, we understand at the beginning stages how that happens, but we're so more likely to be open when it's a woman telling us like, hey, this is like what I did, or this is what I'm doing on your bike. It's more likely you're going to ask the question of why. And we, as women, that's how we learn better, is knowing the why, not just like do this because of this. We actually can learn and retain it when we know the why. But with a man, it's harder for a lot of us to ask the whys. We're just like, okay, he did this and here I go. Like, I just have to trust that it's okay. And this is what I have to do. Like setting my suspension, the bike shop didn't even ask 1 year, like how much I weighed. And I was like, wait, isn't that that's weird. Why wouldn't they ask me that? That's like super important. And even now, like a lot of bikes, probably their suspension isn't even, women's bikes specifically too, isn't even made for my weight. So like, that's a whole other conversation, but, there's a lot of things still happening.
Yeah. And Taryn, to that point too, a lot of things going through my mind, but just one question we ask on our partner questionnaire when someone's like a brand or a representative is reaching out and saying, I'm interested in coming to Rome Fest. And one of the very first questions we have, because I just get so many inquiries that we really had to kind of reduce and vet, right? Of just like, and one of the questions I asked that has been very, very, very helpful in, helping me even take that initial step of, is this a brand I should even, begin the conversation with? And then the onboarding or the vetting process is still really extensive. But the first question I ask is, what is allyship and how does it portrayed, or, I forget my language, but like, how is it represented, embodied in your company values? And because often I'll have one person reach out and they understand what allyship is, maybe, or they're just a brand that's very interested in getting access to our demographic, which we pretty quickly are like, if you're not actually walking the walk, we're a little bit less interested in a partnership here, because it's going to be a bit more one-sided. But if that understanding of what is allyship is a question that they really take to heart and they think about and they reflect it to me, and then I will go into their Instagram or go into their website and see, are there any women, femme, non-binary folks, with people of color portrayed on their feed, on their website, right? Like, is there actually, and their leadership, what can I see a staff roster? Are there femme in their leadership? Are there people of color? That, like, really attempting to see, like, does this brand understand why allyship matters? Because you don't have to be a woman. I mean, there's plenty of women that don't understand what allyship means, right? It doesn't transcend, or it doesn't divide along gender lines. It divides along having done the work, I suppose, of really understanding and dismantling or working on your personal and your professional side to acknowledge white supremacy culture that we have all been brought up in this country. But we've had some incredible brands and some amazing men that have come and truly understand what being an ally is. Sometimes those men are queer, for sure. That doesn't hurt. That they've like experienced some layers of marginalization. But even some of our really straight men that have walked through the world with a lot of privilege, but have had an experience or have had a family member or a sibling or somebody that has been close to them that has walked the world with a little bit less privilege, that they've done some of that work already. And that in and of itself can make such a big difference. Like, our participants feel that if a workshop is being taught from a gentleman who has, and a brand that cares, like Propane and Orbea, like two newer brands that have just come to us, and they're new in the US, but they know that they can't just come in with the same bro culture that all the bigger bike brands started with. And they're trying to do it differently. Yeah, it's exciting.
So refreshing.
It's shifting out there.
Yeah.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Well, that's a really good point you make too, that about women and allyship, that it doesn't just like transcend over gender. I think that's super important, because when we talk about, our stance on women and feeling like we're more nurturing and understanding, like innately than men, like I said, there's always exceptions for sure. And I do want to kind of just exclamation point your point that we're not trying to say that all women are the most welcoming folks ever. We 100% know that there are also women out there who are standing on the side of taking reproductive rights away. So we're not blind to the fact that, hey, all women are for women and for anyone in allyship. And I just wanted to like make that statement there, that we're not blindly saying all women support women, and that there's a lot of change that needs to happen between everyone in this world and country, not just the men. There's lots of work to do across all of us. There's a lot of understanding I need to still do and learn in things that are happening. And
there's so much.
And I just appreciate, I appreciate anyone who can have the conversations. It is an interesting world we live in, and scary to be at a place of not understanding because of how things are received when you do ask questions. It can be hard to feel like you can ask questions. So I just always appreciate when someone can have a conversation and actually help me learn and understand, rather than feeling like, well, I want to know, but I don't know if I can ask. Like, is that okay to ask? How's this question going to be received? So I understand anyone else out there too who wants to learn and isn't quite sure how to do that. But I think going to places and events like Rome Fest, and being around people who are super open to it is one of those ways that you can. And obviously, if you're not a cyclist or you can't make the trip, there's other ways out there. But I think that's a good step, is looking for these kind of communities, events, and things like that, where you can actually start to be around people, at least, and in the environment where there is some openness to it and you can start to learn. And I know I don't want to keep you forever and ever, but I do really want to touch on, because you've mentioned it slightly in some of like being a late in life lesbian, and I really want to touch on how this came to you, the realizations that you went through, and you definitely, as much time as you have, I'm here for it. So when did this change for you come about? Like, how long did it take you to kind of realize or make the move? Just everything I want to know, Sam.
Gosh, me too. I think I'm going to need like 5 more years. I just found, I don't know if finding a therapist is hard for you both, but I've always had like required supervised therapists because I've worked in mental health. So we've always had required like therapy as a part of my jobs. But it's never been somebody I've actively sought out and worked with. And this woman I found 3 months ago is changing my life. Like she is an incredible therapist, and we are doing some really deep work. So let's circle back in like 5 years and maybe I will have unpacked all of it. But for now, as I understand it, and it's still really raw. But I kind of mentioned meeting Ash and Andy in 2018, kind of being the beginning of even just being around anybody that was queer was new. My dad is incredibly homophobic, and I didn't know it. I just never saw anybody that was gay. And now, my mom has kind of helped me understand, like, my dad's really kept any lesbians out of our orbit. My mom would have friends, and if he found out that they were gay, the friendships would never really last. And so I think, and now going back, like, I've had really intense feelings for girls and in puberty, when you're like starting to realize, that you have feelings and what that generates in you. But I couldn't ever categorize it. I could never place it. There was this one woman, if she's listening, Lisa Tobin, you were my first crush. And she was just this incredible cowgirl. She rode bulls and she barrel raced, and she was a total badass. And just this gorgeous, empowered, brilliant human. But because everybody around me just had crushes on boys, that was just what you did. So I couldn't ever categorize it. I couldn't ever understand what those feelings were. And then, that would keep happening. There was, multiple girls in high school. And it was just always like, I must be jealous because I wanted boys to want me was the only way I could understand my feelings. Like when I was so devastated that Emmy started dating David, in the 6th grade or something, I couldn't understand why it wrecked me so. And so the only way I could process it, because I didn't know girls could like girls or have romantic feelings for girls, was just like, I must also want David. And it became this very confusing narrative running through my brain. And I developed this really strong need to have boys, because they were boys in high school, want me and desire me. So that got really related to, thinking I had to be very skinny. I had to be very pretty. I was a size 0. For context, I'm now a size 8. So I was a size 0 with the same height. So I was still 6 foot, 36-inch inseam on my pants, but I was a size 0. And I would like fall for those scams online of like, oh, buy these green tea diet pills, and just enter your, credit card here. And, like, I really had a pretty intense narrative running in my head of like, I just needed to be skinny enough and pretty enough and complacent enough and boys would like me. But I was such a tomboy because turns out I was just like a gay horse girl. And and eventually like I could kind of land one a little bit, and always dated, I think, boys that have now become men that are gay. Not all of them, maybe some of them are bi. Very metro, definitely more feminine men was my type. And yeah, and then I met my very best friend when I was 21, Keegan, the father of my daughter, and we snowboarded together constantly, and he taught me how to mountain bike, and we developed this incredibly deep friendship and love, and I loved being loved by him. And I truly do love him. Like, I can say without question, I love him and I always have. But his question now to me is, have you ever been truly in love with me? And 12 years later, and now having had multiple relationships with women, I'm realizing that to be desired is very different than to desire. And that has been a pretty eye-opening shift inside of me. Not just sexually, but on so many levels of truly understanding like what my fuck yes is versus my yeah. Because it's always been like, yeah, let's have a kid. That makes sense. That's what people do. Yeah, let's buy a house. That's what people do. Like, yeah, at this point now we have the house and the kid. We should probably get married, and I don't regret any of those things, except that they have caused a lot of extra pain for my daughter's dad, in hindsight, because coming out has been not just me coming out, but it's also been the dismantling of our 12-year partnership. And that is fucking painful. Amber, you've gone through separation. It is like hurting other people is absolutely the opposite of my core.
Yeah. And, especially when you love them so much still, like so you wouldn't have had the baby if you didn't. And it's also wild how ugly things can get. And you're like, wait, but we truly do love each other. And we truly do love this baby that we made. And we truly had the best intentions for this life that we saw in front of us. And life kicked us in the nuts, man. I'm so sorry, but I will always be here for you, you just got to continually reassure and be like, same team, just like eye on the prize, our kid, number one, first and foremost, our kid. But it's hard. It's hard when your questions pop up and when your emotions get involved and when you're doing something and they're not, and you need them to hang out with the kid. And it's just, it's complex and complicated, but I feel you on the whole, like, your partner that you had the kiddo with is like your best friend. And wouldn't have had the babies if they weren't,
I'm curious for both of you. Well, because you said that at your core, your intention's never to hurt anybody. And that is, I think, a lot of us, right? And I do think a lot of us, whether it's the men's or women's or whoever's decision it is in the relationship, it takes a while to actually make that move because you know how badly it's going to hurt someone else. We stay in these situations. We stay in relationships, in bad work situations, in so many things because we know that it's going to affect someone else or could affect someone else negatively. Yeah. So we stuff our own feelings and needs and desires down to make it okay for the other person. And again, we talked about this at the beginning of how you're teaching your daughter like these things, you know, it's the your own oxygen mask first cliche. Amber, I know it took you a long time and a lot of internal battle to come to your decision to, well, like to be able to say it out loud, to separate from Murray. Sam, how long, if you're comfortable with saying, like, were you having these internal battles before you were able to like say things out loud to Keegan that like something isn't working here?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's been 2 years, but it's been much, much longer than that. 2 years ago, I developed like really strong feelings for a woman and actually cheated on Keegan with her, which is something that I don't say often because people have a lot of really intense responses to cheating. And sometimes it's hard to explain the nuance if that word is just placed and people kind of associate their own traumas, whether it's through their parents or their own experiences on that. But I stepped out of my marriage without an agreement with Keegan that was okay. And so that really began the cracking open of us, and like instantly told him about it. Like the second I got on a plane and came home, I was like in tears. I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep. And we processed for weeks and tried non-monogamy and, you know, tried all these different routes to see if there was a way to integrate my emerging understanding of my own identity into our marriage. And that was like 2 years ago, next month. But before that, it was baseline anxiety and depression for so long, of just being like, this is the life everybody told me I should want. You know, I have this amazing human that I do life with, and he cooks dinner. He's a chef. I mean, he makes dinner every single night, right? The world told me that everything that I could possibly want existed in my life. And yet I had so much anxiety and depression that I was really good at masking. Again, my sister had big needs. I couldn't have any. So I learned very early on to mask. And I wore that mask well. And it wasn't until having Ani and getting really intense postpartum anxiety that I really had to start like actually like going on medication for anxiety and like trying to find a therapist, and got pretty shafted by some pretty shit therapists. And then this last winter, again, like trying to come out, trying to navigate non-monogamy, tried to have a relationship with another woman who Keegan was very on board with me seeing, trying to do that through the winter. I went on an antidepressant that was absolutely like one of the side effects of antidepressants can be suicidal ideation. I didn't know this, which is bizarre to me having worked in mental health for so long, but I became very, very, very scary. Like had a plan, was really, I couldn't live in my own skin anymore. I was convinced I was ruining Ani's life with my own anxiety and depression. And so I figured like she was still almost young enough where if I was gone, she would recover and not have too many memories of me. And that was like pretty much the realization of like, I can't put other people's health and well-being above mine anymore, because I was going to leave this planet. And that was really intense this winter. Turns out a different med and going off of that was vital. And I went to Colorado to be around my community down there while I detoxed off that med. And I I drove 16 hours in a day to get down and be around people that I was going to be really safe with. And started to like see a little bit of the light again. And I want to live now. I can say with a lot of certainty, I really want to live now, not just for Ani, but also for myself. And I had to leave my partnership with my very, very best friend as a way to be honest with who I was and no longer put other people above me. And I say it, this is kind of one of the first times really sharing that out loud. And there's so much that I want to unpack too in time. But I think one of the biggest things I want to just like let people know is like the more I share, the more people tell me they too have had, the darkest of the dark times, but people don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. No,
we talk about all the wrong things. Yeah. And so the more I have actually reached out to a lot of people in my community and shared, like I went into the woods the other day and baited a grizzly. There was fresh grizzly bear poop and I was feeling like very risky and just like I was in so much agony like 3 weeks ago and I baited a bear. Like it was so fucked up. The bear never came, but I was like, I don't feel I'm suicidal, but I'm definitely flirting with danger in this way that is like, I feel so much angst and I'm so not okay. And I need a physical representation of this not okayness. And that was only 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now trying to ride the waves and call my therapist for an extra appointment when I need it. And, reach out to my people that are really safe and affirming and supportive. Sadly, my two best friends in the world aren't those people for me right now. So I've had to really build new community amidst all of this and being quite houseless and like navigating different homes. So it's been a chaotic summer, but I feel really, really, really hopeful that like I move into my new place this Sunday and I just really feel this like, a really, really big, like having gone through the darkest of the dark, the light is coming.
It's cracking through.
It's coming, honey.
That is.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that.
Very proud of you.
We were so quiet because Amber and I ourselves were choking back listening to you say all those things because they just really hit. And like you said, we share all the wrong things. We talk about this often of social media, the highlight reel. We always want to talk about the things that are good, or we talk, vent about our problems, but like not the surface level problems, not the deep, dark kind of problems, because we don't want to put that on other people. But
yes,
we do what we think we should, and we have what we think, or we think we should have these things, right? Like we should our lives away. You're like, everyone tells me this is what I should want and should have and should be happy for it. And it's like, no, why? That's not just what someone else thinks that it's a perfect life. The American dream, is not everyone's dream. But it does take a long time, I think, especially our generation, to realize that this actually isn't working for me and it's not what I should have. What I should have is what I want to have. And this is not what I want to have, or it's not what's working. But going through something like you have as well, like a complete 180 in life, is so hard, especially when people in your life are not open to this other way of life that you feel you should be living. Then that's got to be much harder, exceptionally harder. So to have the courage, I think, to stay through and realize, like, the medication, to even be able to change medications rather than fall into the hole that you were deeper into the hole that you were in. That's what's scary about mental health is, one, a lot of people can't access it, but also you're getting help, you're on meds and still having these feelings. So a lot of people think that then that's it. Like I tried the meds and it didn't work. So that's just it for me. And that's a terrible, scary feeling that people feel like they tried and it wasn't enough, when it's really just like, no, the meds aren't perfect. and it does take time to find what works for you, and we're still not taught that. It's like, nope, this was your one chance, you tried and you failed. And so, I'm just so happy that you were able to realize that and try different medication and find some community and support, and ultimately keep going through the darkness that you're still very much in, but like I said, seeing those cracks at least of light and pushing forward, and knowing that your daughter definitely needs you, and no matter how old she is, your mark would have been left on her, and there would be a hole in her heart and everyone's heart that you touched. So I'm
so glad you're here, sister.
Yeah.
So glad we got to
keep
meet
filling
you.
Those hearts.
And also
absolutely.
Just like seeing that connection between you and your daughter, like you guys have something. What you're showing her, what you're exposing her to, like even the ugly, like your journey right now, it's gonna carry with her, like it's so much more important for our children to see us happy than in that depressive state. Cause I was there too. I was just like going along with and you do that as a mother. You're just like, okay, I just gotta like get to the next thing. And like, I gotta do this, I gotta do X, Y, and Z. And like thinking of like living on your own and like affording things on your own nowadays, that I think the financial thing for me leaving was the hardest. But we figure out ways, you know what I mean? Like I was hanging out with my cousin the other day, and she just kept on saying that. She's like, you know what? Things just happen. We figure it out. And because she's also going through a separation too. I just like, there is this collective that is happening right now where women are like, we don't have to anymore. We do not. And it's fucking killing us. So we're not going to.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're still here, Sam.
Yes, me too.
I'm glad we met you. I'm glad we're talking to you. And thank you again so much for sharing your story. That's very brave of you.
It is. And I think it's so important for both of you to share your stories because of exactly what you just said, Amber, of this, we don't have to and we're not going to anymore. And like I said, we're going backwards in things where we're feeling this outside powerful sources are putting this feeling back on us of like, nope, you have to. If this happened to you, you have to. You have no choice. And that's like, no, this doesn't make sense. Why do we have to go through this, but other people in the world don't have to?
It's kind of like the sex ed thing and consent, like where it gets put on women. It doesn't have to. Men can pull their big pants up and figure some fucking shit out too.
Yeah, they can be the ones who have to go through the mud. But before we get out of here, I would love for you just to, I know you've already left the listeners with so much, but if there's anything else in regards to any kind of resources of your own like personal resources, RoamFest resources, anything that you can leave the audience with of where they can find you, Roam, anything at all, let them know. That we'll put all of that in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Instagram is definitely our best way to get communication out. So follow us at This Is Roam, ROAM, and then our website is roamfest.com. That's definitely if you feel like, really to Taryn's point, right? Like to be in inclusive spaces, like you don't have to have done all the work of dismantling, the patriarchy and white supremacy and understanding how racism still exists. Like you don't have to be there to come and play bikes with us, but come with an open heart. We definitely get some women that are like, what do you mean we have to put our pronouns on our name tags? And we'll have a very loving conversation. Like, and at the end of the day, we all love biking. So if that feels like something you want to be a part of from beginner, we don't love like brand new because those trails are really scary out there and people do get really hurt, but like, intermediate, beginning, intermediate to advanced riders, like if you want to come out and have fun, for sure. It's September 20th through the 22nd, and we are almost sold out. We are very close. So we are sold out of most of the add-ons, but like actual festival passes, we still have some for. Film festival, a dance party that'll change your life. It's neon themed this year, and it's about 800 women and femme dancing silent disco style to the best playlists. So if that feels like your jam, please come and party with us. And my own learning, gosh, it's so ongoing. Not everybody can work with my therapist, but I wish they could. She's so special. Learning a lot about EMDR. I think that's been a really important thing. And then, like, to your point, like, I got referred to a psychiatrist and they were 6 weeks out. So mental health matters for sure. And I don't know what the answer is to that. But yeah, I am loud and I am proud and I don't hide my rainbows anymore. And I've gotten some pushback from people in my community about that. And I'm getting tired of having the conversations of why visibility matters, but I'm still willing to, like, compile resources maybe so that I don't have to be the only voice. I'm not the only voice. There's thousands out there, but to my own close people, you know, like asking, why do I have to wear rainbows? And to my answer, I always say, like, I was force-fed heteronormativity my entire life. Like, straight people don't have to hide being straight. Like, you don't have to worry about, you know, if you're a woman kissing your boyfriend in public. Like, you just see straight culture everywhere. So it is important to see queer culture. It is vital to see queer culture, actually. But I don't yet know. I put out a thing on Instagram this morning of, like, any recommendations for why visibility matters, because I don't think my voice is the one that's going to connect with some of these people most confused and closest to me. But if anybody has any recommendations, I'm totally all ears. And then I just have my own personal Instagram, which is at Samantha Marie. MURIE is me. I think that's me. Is that me?
Yeah, I think so. Or Sam Marie. We'll link it all. But again, we can't thank you enough for sharing your story. And for anyone out there, you know, we've had plenty of conversations that are fun and light. We've had plenty of conversations where we go kind of deeper. And I hope all of you listeners out there do know that we are a resource for you to reach out to as well. Of course, we do not take the place of a professional by any means at all. But if you need a place to talk ever, just a friend to talk to, vent to, whether it's the good, the bad, the icky, the whatever, you can always reach out to us on our personal pages, on our podcast page, especially if you're a friend that knows us personally and have our phone numbers. Like, just remember to call us, even if it's like for 5 minutes that you're feeling kind of shitty or whatnot. And if we don't answer the phone, always send a text and just say, hey, you know, if you have the time and space, I really need someone to chat with. I think just being open about that instead of making the call is missed. And then you, just like the medicine, are like, oh, it didn't work. I tried. Like, we're a texting society these days. People have got a million things going on. Don't be afraid to say, I really need to talk, and be able to get that message out loud and clear. But yeah, so we're here. Reach out. I'm sure Sam is open to conversations if you have a situation that relates most to her. So like I said, we'll link RoamFest, we'll link Sam's personal, and you guys can always find us here. And we hope that some point of this conversation connected with you all, because I know lots of it hit home for me. And again, one last time, thank you so much, Sam. Amber, anything?
That was beautifully put, Taryn. I love you so much, my friend.
I love you. All right, everybody out there.
Amazing.
Thank you, Sam. We will talk to all you listeners out there next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye, Internet Ether.
Bye.
Stay safe, Taryn.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and would do us a huge favor, since we don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and would rate and review us on whatever platform it is you use, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever it is. And if you're listening and downloading just through the website, tearingituppodcast.com, leave comments. We'll definitely engage back with you. And on social media right now, we're just on Instagram. Tearing It Up Podcast is the handle. Like the post, share the post, comment on the post, whatever it is you got. Show us your love so we just stay relevant and show up in the rankings at all. So again, rate and review, please. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.